We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and we are the Commando Elite. Everything else is just a toy. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Pepsi month, and this week we are talking the 1998 film Small Soldiers. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host with a military-grade microprocessor, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
Yeah.
Man, that microprocessor, I thought it'd be more advanced than this. Whoa, look at this.
You asked a question, you got an answer.
Look at this rat-a-tat, just back and forth. No wonder we're co-hosts of a podcast.
Look at this. What's this? This is just the banter, man. This is what the folks come for. Yeah, I am ready to talk about Small Soldiers. I remember when this came out. I remember that my brother's football team went to see it in theaters as a bonding exercise before the season started.
The entire team. That's fun.
You know, they were all like 6 years old, but, you know, because in Texas, you start playing football at that age.
And you start watching PG-13 movies at that age, too.
With your coach. Who would have thought?
Well, what's your history with the movie? Did you see it in theaters as well? Did you catch it later? And have you watched it very much over the years?
Chris, I wasn't on the team, so I didn't get to go.
You could have gone on like a separate trip with someone else.
Dad, if you're listening, confirm to me if I saw this in theaters. I don't remember, honestly. I know I've seen it a lot. That I will say. As far as whether I saw it in theaters, I don't remember. I know that like we had it on tape. I know we watched it a lot. This movie has like large chunks that just exist in my head. I've seen it, and it definitely is like in my brain. And so there's definitely a history here. Definitely a extensive viewings as a kid, teenager. But I cannot remember if I saw it in theaters. But otherwise, just a massive staple of my childhood.
Yeah, I mean, same. I don't remember if I saw it in theaters. I don't like a distinct memory of seeing it there. I feel like I might have, but like you just said, I saw it a ton. I had it on VHS. I watched it a lot. I know so much of this movie, and the soundtrack, absolute banger. This is one of the first CDs I ever bought. I listen to it all the time. The soundtrack is interesting because it is basically a classic rock soundtrack, but almost all of them are remixes featuring like hip hop artists. But for me, being 10 years old or whatever, this was like my introduction to a lot of these songs. This is like the first version of the song I heard. Like we have War, which just takes like the chorus of the classic song, but it's by Bone Thugs and Harmony, Henry Rollins, and Tom Morello and Flea. It's like this super group of the 90s doing their version of it. Another one, Bites the Dust, featuring Wyclef Jean. First time I ever heard that song. I remember like distinctly hearing like the original Queen version and being like, where's the rapping? Like, where's this is missing vocals? Like the original started to sound strange to me because I listened to this version so much. Love is a Battlefield featuring Queen Latifah. What else is on here? I think Surrender by Cheap Trick might basically just be the regular version, but Tom Sawyer by Rush and DJ Z-Trip. It's actually a pretty cool like remix of that song. I still go back to the soundtrack. I think it's awesome. It's very strange because in the movie itself, like Kirsten Dunst's character, her favorite band is Led Zeppelin and she loves classic rock. And there's a classic rock soundtrack, but it's all the original versions of it. Like during the credits, there's like a medley of some of these remixes, but the entire soundtrack is remixes of the songs you heard in the movie. I don't know why they did that, but I'm glad they did because the soundtrack goes hard.
Oh man, the soundtrack did not live in my brain as much as it did when I watched it back this time, where like I was like, whoa. I didn't realize. I guess maybe like Another One Bites the Dust. I remembered that, but like a lot of these songs, I just didn't realize were here, and it is pretty wild.
Now our theme for this month, it's Pepsi month, and I know a lot of people probably saw Small Soldiers pop up in their feed and like, wait a minute, this is best of the rest. This is, poorly received movies. Why are they covering one of the greatest motion pictures of all time? I agree. Just wait, these reviews were not too kind. Andrew, I love this movie, and I'm excited to talk about it. But again, Pepsi month, what people are probably actually thinking is, how does this fit in with our theme? So far, most of the other movies we're covering are genuinely, like, years later, people like confuse the two films. Like, hey, what's the asteroid movie that had Morgan Freeman as president? Was that Armageddon? Or in Ed TV, did he know he was being filmed, or was it like secret cameras? Like, people kind of blur the lines between the two movies. Small Soldiers is simply like the edgy Toy Story. It comes out a few years later. People aren't confusing these two movies. I mean, one's completely animated, one is live action, and it just lives in the shadow of that movie. So it's a little bit different, but undeniably, you can't talk about a movie from the 90s featuring sentient toys and not think of Toy Story and the Toy Story effect. And so I pulled a few reviews here to illustrate this point. Roger Ebert says, part of the inspiration for Small Soldiers may have come from Toy Story, where toy soldiers were among the characters. But too much of it may have come from Sid, the human kid in that movie who lived next door and entertained himself by taking his toys apart and reassembling them in grotesque ways. The New York Times says, there are innocent echoes of Toy Story and darker ones of Dante's own Gremlins pictures, which had the witty balance of mischief and horror that Small Soldiers strangely lacks. Well, I disagree with that. Entertainment Weekly says, this movie is kind of like if Toy Story turned to the dark side. So again, the conversation around this movie was almost impossible to describe it, review it, without the obvious parallels of the hit toy movie that came out a few years before.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
I'd be saying, a much more obvious comparison was A Bug's Life and Ants. Ants being the Pepsi. Why aren't you doing that? Because it's our show, and we don't want to talk about ants.
I also don't want to talk about Woody Allen, so I think
well, that's kind of part of talking about ants. It's the main.
I mean, it's an interesting comparison. Like, when you actually brought it up, I thought it was kind of interesting because I don't know that I'd ever thought about it that way before. But then I was like, well, yeah, of course. Like, it's a movie about toys that are alive in the late 90s. Of course, it's going to get compared to Toy Story because Toy Story was really good and continued to be really good. Fun fact, Chris, you want to know something?
Lay it on me.
I never saw any of the Toy Story sequels when I was younger.
Any of the sequels?
So I saw Toy Story, but I never saw like Toy Story 2 or 3 or... I mean, I saw.
Well, I feel like
came out.
3 and 4.
3 was much later.
Younger anymore. 3 is like
when 2
2010.
came out. So yeah, a young man of 23. So
you didn't see Toy Story 2 until you were much older?
No, I didn't. Like, I saw the first one, and I'm guessing it's because like my parents were just like, it's this new kids Pixar movie. We'll take them to see it. But by the time 2 came out, I guess I had moved on, and I was like, can't waste my time on Toy Story. I got to go watch Batman and Robin.
I've seen Small Soldiers. I know what toys are capable of.
Yeah. Anything else is just a toy.
So seeing Toy Story 2 much later, what are your thoughts on it? Or do you have a Toy Story 1 through 4 ranking in your head?
No.
Do you have strong feelings about these sequels?
Not really. They're all
okay.
good.
A lot of people do.
I'm at a point where don't get me wrong, I know we just ranked like M. Night Shyamalan's movies for our show, but like I used to be that guy that was just kind of like, well, the objective greatest film of all time is Vertigo.
Sure.
I used to be like I used to have these like, oh, well, if I'm going to rank this, I'm going to think about this. But like, I'm really at a point now where I'm just like, man, I don't care. Like, I just really want to watch. I just want to watch and be entertained. Like, I really just don't want to like think about it. So like Toy Story, turns out if you watch all 4 of those in a row, you're just going to have a really great time.
Yeah, and be sad off and on.
That's life, man.
I agree. Ain't that the truth? I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I'm much less into rankings now as I used to be. Mostly because if I were to like post a ranking online and get told, "Well, you're wrong," I would just be like, "Okay." Like, I'm not gonna fight. Like, but I do think it can be a fun way. You know, our M. Night Shyamalan episode, I think, is a good example. Like, it's a fun like leaping off point for conversation and discussion about the movies. But I'm not into like arguing for my movie making number 1 or my list being correct. That being said, it's 3, 4, 1, 2 for Toy Story.
3, 4, 1, 2. Really? The third is the best. Any other franchises like that?
I probably need to watch it again because I saw 3 in theaters and it's like returning to this nostalgic property and they really lean into it. I'm not sure if it had that same effect if I went back and watched it now. But the only ranking in that list I'm going to fight for, I just said I wasn't going to fight for my ranking, but I'm confident 2 is at the bottom. 2 is easily my least favorite, which I've heard many people say it's their absolute favorite. I don't understand that. 2 started off as a straight-to-video movie, and to me, that's exactly what it feels like. It's these characters you love on a side story versus the other 3 being about a toy's relationship with their kid, and 2 is not. And that's why it doesn't work for me as much. They're all good movies. But, yeah, I think in general, it's a series that kind of got better as it went along with the misstep of 2.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's talk about Small Soldiers, though, not Toy Story. This movie, Small Soldiers, was released July 10th, 1998, made on a budget of $40 million, and at the box office, it only brings in $71.8 million. Not a box office success. Critically, critics are split. It holds just a 49% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. I was very surprised to see this is one of the rare instances where the audience score is lower. 45% audience score. I've made this point before. Rotten Tomatoes, not around when this movie comes out. These are people logging in years after the fact to write a negative review for Small Soldiers. Who are you people? What is wrong with you? This movie's great. I'm very surprised to see there's not more avid defenders online for it.
Yeah, these reviews are, man, it's wild because, you know, there's 100,000 plus audience ratings. There's only 47 critics reviews, which is not uncommon for movies like this. I mean, it's because somebody has to go back and find all the reviews and basically aggregate them for this site, or like the reviewer has to it's a kind of involved process. But yeah, the audience score, I would have expected this to at least be in the 60s or the 70s. Like, I would have expected nostalgia, the childhood nostalgia would have elevated this one into fresh territory. But alas.
Taking a look at the creative team, got a lot of writers on this one. It's written by Gavin Scott, Adam Rifkin, Ted Elliott, and Terry Rossio. Breaking it down a little bit, Gavin Scott, some successful credits to his name. Did write The Borrowers, the John Goodman version of that movie. Adam Rifkin had also wrote Mouse Hunt the year before. Goes on to do Detroit Rock City, some childhood favorites. And then the writing team of Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio together, they worked on Little Monsters, that weird Fred Savage movie from the 80s, Aladdin, The Road to El Dorado, Shrek, Pirates of the Caribbean. They've got some hits under their belt. Now, looking at the production of this movie, according to Joe Dante, our director, he says that initially everyone was on board to make a edgier movie for teens, a little bit darker. But once it was obvious there was going to be toy and merchandise tie-ins, he got a lot of pressure to soften it up a little bit. So what I'm putting together here is that Gavin Scott and Adam Rifkin laid down the bones of this movie, and maybe they brought in Ted and Terry to add a little bit of lighthearted family magic and whimsy to it, at least as much as they could. And you end up with the final product that we get, which, for my money, still lands more on the edgy side than wholesome family comedy.
Yeah, I would never describe this movie really as like I don't think I think a family can watch it, but like I would never like Toy Story is like a wholesome family comedy type movie. Like
Right.
and this is definitely not that. Like the way he kind of described it is that like by the time they decided that it was too late basically. And so like he's like so you end up with both approaches in there. So these sequences where they are kind of treating it more like a here's this something that everybody could, but then like it switches into, oh, cool. Now the evil toys are committing warfare on this family inside a house. And it's like, what do you, okay, that's not really what you're going for. These guys literally just firebombed this place and you're trying to describe it as a family approachable thing. But yeah, it's a tale as old as time though. The studio sets out to make one thing, halfway through decides that they need to take a different approach and try to do something else, and it ends up largely kind of, I don't want to say this, it usually ends up ruining the movie because you end up with too many cooks in the kitchen, you end up with too many people trying to decide how this is going to go, you got a tone that changes or can't be consistent because they keep wanting it to be different. And in this case, I think the final product, like you said, still mostly lands. Like I think the tone is generally pretty consistent here. You're watching, I mean, as far as a tone about toys attacking humans can be, but it is always annoying when you have those stories of like the studio coming in and being like, well, actually, 6 weeks into production, and it's like, well, would have been nice to know this like ahead of time.
And the premise of this movie really makes a problem for the toy aspect, for the merchandising, because the whole point of the movie is like, these toys can do what they actually do in the commercials, make toys that move and talk and think. Well, if you're going to put a version of this on the shelf, it's not going to do any of those things. It's going to be the quote-unquote lame toy that this movie is making fun of, or at least that Dennis Leary's character is making fun of. It's like, it can never live up to the expectation. That being said, I still wouldn't mind having a line of these toys. I'm usually not a toy guy, but some like legit looking versions of these guys I think would be a pretty sweet thing to have on the shelf.
Yeah, they look pretty cool.
And as we've already mentioned, this movie is directed by Joe Dante. Man, I love this guy. This isn't how our Mark Strong Award works, but I feel like he's deserving of some kind of recognition. I think he's what makes this movie work. So I think you were just saying about still landing on a pretty consistent tone and hitting that kind of balance between edgy and not too dark. I think you got to chalk it up to Joe Dante. That's what he's made a career out of. Gremlins, I think I mentioned in one of those reviews earlier, probably his most well-known film. But also does The Burbs, Matinee, speaking of John Goodman, a very overlooked movie from the early 90s about 1950, 60s cinema, 50s, one of those decades. When's the Cuban Missile Crisis, Andrew?
62.
There you go. About the early 60s in cinema. Looney Tunes Back in Action, which is a movie that was definitely overlooked at the time, but a lot of people have gone back to and thought, you know what, this feels more Looney Tunes than Space Jam did. But he's got this approach, this style where if he's doing live action, it's got animation influence. If he's doing something more animated, it's got some edge to it. And his puppet work is absolutely like legendary in his movies. I just love that he has these wacky Gremlins is a great example. Like Gremlins 1, surprise hit. Gremlins 2, he's like, well, if I'm going to make a sequel, I'm going to get weird with it. And boy, does he get weird with it. And he's not at all, like, his goal was not to, like, make more money than the first one. I'm sure he would have been happy with it if it did. It did not. But he made the movie that he wanted to make. And I think for that reason, he's maybe had some difficulty getting some movies across the finish line. A lot of unrealized projects, a lot of small budgets, because he's kind of a wild card if you're betting on his movie to succeed. But I appreciate his dedication to his very unique vision for film.
Yeah, I agree. There's a very, he does things the way he wants to do them. And, doesn't tend to like to compromise on that, even though he kind of ends up having to sometimes. Man, I haven't watched Matinee in a long time. I probably due to rewatch that one. That was
so good. And Mant is one of the best movie within a movies ever. It's the like doctor that injects himself and starts turning into a giant ant. He becomes the Mant. It's so stupid. It's so good.
I would watch that movie though. Is my point.
Yes.
But I mean, you literally go to Joe Dante's filmography. There is a whole section on unrealized projects. You've got Jurassic Park. You've got The Phantom. We talked about that on our Phantom episode where he was in the running to direct that. Halloween 4. There was an attempt at one of the Batman attempts had him briefly circling that. Halloween 3, even Philadelphia Experiment. You know, it just endless lists of stuff where he just had a lot of stuff he was attached to that never really got to the finish line. Reminds me a little bit of Guillermo del Toro, where it feels like there's more stuff he's not making than does make at a certain period of time, where they're attached to so many things that it feels like they never quite get to the finish line on too many things. But yeah, got to respect the man for going out there and doing what he wants to do in the way he wants to do it, and not really compromising on that.
All that being said, Andrew, it's time that we talk about this film, all the positives, everything we like, and what works about Small Soldiers. Ready to do this?
Yes.
After the Heartland Toy Company is purchased by the huge corporation Globotech, two toy developers named Larry and Irwin are asked by their new boss to create action figures that actually do what the toys in the commercials do. Larry uses the corporation's access to military-grade weaponry to install an advanced microprocessor in the new line of toys, giving them the ability to move, think, and learn. When the entire new line of toys, consisting of army soldiers called the Commando Elite and the strange aliens they are programmed to destroy called the Gorgonites, end up in a small family toy store, they break out of their boxes and begin playing out their roles. The toy store owner's son, Alan, befriends Archer, leader of the Gorgonites, and soon finds himself helping the aliens fend off the small soldiers. When the battle escalates to lethal weaponry, Alan bands together with his family and neighbors to make a final stand. I love that this movie somehow gets to a point where you've got, 8 or so humans holed up in a house fighting toys. And it's never like, where are the cops? Where are the police? Why did they just call somebody? Like, we just so buy in. Like, these humans buy into their war and like, yeah, I'll help fight. And we just bypass a lot of logic. And that's not at all a knock at the movie. Quite the opposite. That is what we call movie magic. Because it
immersion
works in the movie. Absolutely. God, Andrew, I love this movie. I can't wait to talk about it. Before we get to the scenes, though, we got to break down this cast, and we have a hell of a cast to break down. I mean, I would say it was pretty stacked at the time, but even grew over time with what some of these people would go on to do, particularly our young female lead of the movie. But, before we go one by one here, we have to start with the high point, the best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode, we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off. Who's getting your Mark Strong Award for Small Soldiers?
Phil Hartman's just not in this movie enough. I really want to give it to him.
I know that's where your heart wants to go.
He's just not. Every time he's on screen, I love what he's doing, but he's just not in this movie enough to quantify that for me. So I have to go to, I guess, one of our leads, and I'm going Tommy Lee Jones as Major Chip Hazard.
Dude, I'm gonna go. I agree. Also getting my Mark Strong Award. I'm so glad you ended up there. I'll let you talk first, but yeah, I love this so much.
He's so unbelievably good here. Apparently, a couple of people turned this down, including John Mahoney and God, what's his name? Arlie Ermey from Full Metal Jacket. He thought it was just too similar to what he was doing in Full Metal Jacket, so he wasn't super interested in it. But
Which
Like,
is
it's
weird
odd.
because Arlie Ermy did that all the time. I mean,
All the time.
he
Like,
does
all the time.
Saving Silverman, for crying out loud, playing basically the same character.
Like,
But
I guess it's like he wants to play a character who's not military or military adjacent, but
Just
play
has
the
that
same
energy.
type of
Yeah.
character. Like, he's like, it's like, I don't want to be in the military. I just want to act like I'm in the military. But,
and a toy army soldier was too close to being
too
in the
close
military.
to Full Metal Jacket. But anyway, I'm glad they landed on Tommy Lee Jones. His voice performance makes this character all the things that he needs to be. He's menacing, he's terrifying, he's everything that this character needs to be for this performance as kind of Chip Hazard evolves and changes throughout, because he starts off just base level mission, but then like he literally has these moments where he's like he realizes that like he's not just himself. There's this whole army of commando elite out there, and he, you know, seeks them out and builds this entire huge army because his motivation is, I've lost this battle, but I'm not going to lose the war. And so Tommy Lee Jones just does a great job with that. Like the lines that he says as this character are just like, they're burned into my brain. I will always remember his voice as Chip Hazard. Fun fact, though, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but Phil Hartman once played a character in The Groundlings called Chick Hazard.
Interesting.
I can't find anything. I can't find anything that like definitively confirms this was the case, but it's a weird coincidence.
I think it's probably a coincidence because Chip Hazard works so well as like, you know, microchip Hazard. It's going wrong. It sounds like a military soldier nickname. Like it just fits so well without being a reference. But maybe, maybe that is pretty weird.
Anyway, Tommy Lee Jones, aces.
So good. I love that so much. Like his speeches in particular are kind of nonsense, and they're kind of just cobbled together from different military movies, or they sound like it could be from a speech, but he's usually not making too direct of a point. He's just sounding like an inspirational platoon leader. But the reason this works so well is because he plays it deadly serious and totally straight. I mean, it's the same reason he works so well in Men in Black. In both cases, both roles, you have a ludicrous sci-fi premise, but he's being totally deadly serious. And this movie needs that so much. If this was wacky or played for laughs, the movie kind of falls apart, or at the very least has a wildly different tone. But this character can be funny when he needs to be, as far as, you know, it's crazy the small toy soldier is giving these dramatic line readings, but also menacing when it's time for him to like lead this army. It's kind of terrifying that this military leader sounds the way he does, has the I mean, really, truly, and honestly, he's bringing a certain, what would you call it, Andrew?
Gravitas.
Yes, gravitas. Tommy Lee Jones, so good at it. And
I almost went high pitched there to subvert expectations, but I can't disrespect Tommy Lee Jones like that.
Well done, Andrew. This man's career is fascinating because he's been acting for just decades. I mean, looks like since the early 70s, looking at his credits. But he's really just a guy, just another actor for a long time, until maybe The Fugitive pops off in the early 90s. And just out of nowhere, you know, almost 3 decades into his career, he has this crazy run in the 90s. And not only a crazy run as leading man, but in like family films. Like he's like a child favorite. Things like Batman Forever and Men in Black and Here and Small Soldiers. Little kids know who Tommy Lee Jones is all of a sudden and love this guy. Also U.S. Marshals, Double Jeopardy, Rules of Engagement. He's just blows up in the 90s and continues that success. And now he's like one of our finest actors. But again, after 3 decades of people not really knowing who he is, beyond maybe a character actor or supporting role in various movies.
Man, I watched him in a movie called The Eyes of Laura Mars, which is John Carpenter wrote that script, but he doesn't direct it. Irvin Kershner directs it, or Irvin Kershner. Sorry. Probably he's most notably known for directing a little film called The Empire Strikes Back.
I've heard of it.
Before that, he directed this movie, The Eyes of Laura Mars, and it's so weird because the movie is essentially about a woman who like has visions of like her eyes see the eyes of some killer, some mystery killer, and she's trying to work with people to figure out who this killer is before it's too late. But she's watching these murders as they happen, and it's very traumatic and it's very different. And it's Tommy Lee Jones is in it, and I always get thrown off by it when I watch that movie because that movie's 1978, so he's 32 in that movie, and he just looks like Tommy Lee Jones though, and that's another checkbox on the list of I'm just never gonna be a man, am I? Like ever, just never ever, never ever ever. But I love Tommy Lee Jones. There's a really great story that William Friedkin tells. He was making The Hunted in 2003, which is kind of like a weird, just little mix on like, kind of like The Fugitive, but like it's basically there's a former special ops operative has gone rogue, and his old commander has to come back in and team up with the cops to take him down. Not a particularly groundbreaking story, but Benicio del Toro plays the rogue agent, and Tommy Lee Jones plays his old mentor. And William Friedkin would tell stories about how like Benicio del Toro, they'd be like blocking a scene, and Benicio del Toro would come in and he would just have all these questions. Like Tommy Lee Jones would walk in and be like, okay, so I walk through the door, I walk over to her, I say these lines, I walk over to the window, I look out the window, I walk back, say something else, walk back through the door. And they'd block it, he'd rehearse it, they'd shoot it, and they'd be done. Tommy Lee Jones was like, great. Benicio del Toro would be the one that was like, why do I have to come through the door? Like, why am I, could I come through the window? And he's like, why would you come through the window? Like, Benicio del Toro's asking all these, like, weird questions.
What would my character think as he steps in?
Exactly. Literally. That's not even a joke. That's literally what del Toro would do. And he was telling all these stories about how, like, del Toro would say that. And then, like, Nick Nolte. He mentioned Nick Nolte. Nick Nolte used to write, like, 300 pages on his characters' histories and then hand them to the director to read before they started shooting. He'd legitimately do this. Apparently, he'd read the script, get an understanding of his character, and then like write out the life of his character in like prose form, and then hand it to the director and be like, "Cool, this is my character's history." And Friedkin he got one from Nolte and he started reading it, and he's like, "This is awful." He's like, "This is absolutely terrible." And then Nolte would show up the next day and he'd be like, "Hey, did you read all that?" And he'd be like, "Yeah." So you're gonna walk through the door and like just blow right past it. And I'm like, oh man. But in that regard, William Friedkin loved working with Tommy Lee Jones because he was like the least egotistical, demanding actor of all time. Like he would literally, you'd come in, he didn't, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like diving into your character and,
sure,
but there's a line. But he would literally come in, he'd read the script, he'd know what he was doing, he'd come in, do his thing, walk back out. No question, and William Friedkin loved him for that.
I used to be really fascinated hearing stories of, actors like doing extreme weight loss or weight gain and method and not breaking character. And be like, wow, like that's, they're really dedicated to their art. It's really fascinating. And like, as I've gotten older, like I have so much respect for someone like Tommy Lee Jones or Samuel Jackson. I've heard stories about they show up, they do their job, and then they go have their life. Like they're just really good at their job. There's room for it all. There's like, you get good performances in both ways, different methods, that's fine. But I think it's all the attention goes to the method stuff. But there's something to be said for someone that can just act really well on command when they need to, and then go about their day. Like there's a different kind of impressive. The
issue I tend to have is that most of the people you hear doing the extreme method actors are like jerks. Like they seem to be using it as an excuse to just kind of be a jerk. Like it's like, oh, I'm playing an awful mean person in this movie, so I'm going to be awful and mean during the whole production. And I'm like, or are you just awful and mean and you're looking for an excuse to do that and call it acting? Brian Cox, I think I've said it before. Somebody talked to him about method acting and he just kind of scoffed and went, "You could just try acting. Like you don't need
just act.
Yeah, just act. It's not that hard." Yeah, I love Tommy Lee Jones. He's great here. And so, like you said, all the credit to him.
We got a lot of cast to go through, though. They had a lot of fun casting these toys, but before we get to the rest of the voice work, let's go through some of the humans here. Like the Abernathy family, you have Gregory Smith as Alan, essentially our lead of this movie. He's the young boy who convinces the toy delivery guy to loan him this set of toys, and that kicks off all of the action. He's got a crush on his neighbor, and he's a cool guy. I mean, when I was watching this when I was 10 years old, I was like, yeah, that's a cool dude. I hope I'm like him in about like 5 years. I think he's like 15 or something. But yeah, it's totally it's important because we've talked about child actors a ton of times, and if he was particularly bad, it would really probably hurt the movie. But I think he's doing a good job here. Honestly, a tall task because a lot of the time the toys are CG, which means he's acting against nothing, especially like his conversations with Archer. So all the more impressive for a young actor in 1998 when this technology is still pretty new to be able to turn in a good performance like this.
I agree. I remember him also from that Harriet the Spy movie they made just a couple years before this. He's in that. I definitely remembered that face. He was also on the show Everwood for a long time with alum of the show, Treat Williams, the greatest actor of all time. But yeah, he's doing a good job here. Like you said, this is a tough spot, especially for like a younger actor to basically be acting against nothing. It's a tough spot to sit in sometimes about just kind of trying to still give a compelling performance when the thing you're acting against isn't there. And sometimes they'll put like stand-ins and they'll have like they'll put in stand-ins, or you'll have like somebody at least reading the lines so that you have something to react to, but it's still kind of tough. And there's actors, I think it's probably mentioned this before too, but like Joaquin Phoenix turned down Doctor Strange because he was like, I can't really act off, like he didn't want to do the green screen stuff. He just wasn't super interested in a movie that was going to do that. The kind of big budget, CG stuff. And, he said, he didn't really say it like backhandedly. He's just like, I just don't think I'd play well off of all that. And I think that's completely valid. I think that's, it's not something that is for everyone, but especially for him being the age he was when they made this. Great job.
His dad is played by Kevin Dunn. His name is Stuart. He's the toy shop owner. And Kevin Dunn's one of those guys, like, You've definitely seen him a million times.
You've seen him.
Couldn't tell you a single thing. I mean, scrolling through his credits, maybe Hot Shots is what I'm recognizing him from. But most of these, I'm like, I don't know. Have I seen that? I can't picture who he plays in it. But yeah, you've totally seen this guy. But we have a classic.
Also, alum of the show.
Ooh, what did we talk about him in?
Godzilla.
Who is he in Godzilla?
He plays Colonel Hicks.
See, I don't know.
Like
I believe you,
like the
but
lead
I can't.
military guy.
Okay,
no,
sure.
I think the biggest thing that most people might know him for is the Transformers series. He plays Shia LaBeouf's dad. He's in like the first 3 or 4 of those. I know him from Ghostbusters 2. He's in the first like sequence when Bill Murray's character has like a psychic show, and he's the one that says that he has a strong psychic feeling that the world is going to end on New Year's Eve that year. And he turns out to be correct, that there is something like, if the Ghostbusters don't stop what's happening, the world will end on New Year's Eve that year. So he actually turns out to be the psychic on a psychic program who's correct. So what a notch in the belt for an actor.
Then we have Anne Magnuson as Irene Abernathy, his mom. And this character has like the slight little arc that's kind of like a joke that pays off because Kevin Dunn, his dad, is consistently getting mad at Alan and yelling at him, and she's like constantly trying to calm down, take a deep breath, do breathing exercises, exhale the stress. She does that through 2/3 of this movie, and then whenever stuff goes down in the finale and everyone's holed up in the house scared, she takes charge. She's like, you on the windows, board them up, you in the closet, and she just like commands both the families into action. It's a subtle little thing, but this is the deep cast, and so I appreciate giving these little quirks to every single character. I think the script actually does a pretty good job at that.
Yeah, I think so. And it is. I was looking through her filmography. I was like, do I know her from anything else? And I was like, it's a wild career too. She apparently used to be the manager of Club 57, which I thought was pretty wild. That's a club out in New York City, but just a very, and has, she has solo albums and music and all sorts of different stuff. I guess maybe she has a small part in Panic Room a couple of years after this.
Okay.
I remember her from that too. She's also got an uncredited role as the Madam in Tank Girl. So I'm guessing we probably didn't talk about her there, but apparently all around doing different stuff. And here she's doing exactly what she needs to do. And like you said, she gets kind of an arc to kind of run with that she definitely does.
Kirsten Dunst plays Christy Fimple.
Fimple.
Christy Fimple. Alum of the show, obviously. Talked about her back on Spider-Man 3. It is a pretty horrible last name, but she's the next door neighbor that our lead has a crush on. And at first she says, I'm sorry, I only date older guys. She's the cool chick next door that listens to classic rock. Andrew, Alan literally says, you're not like most girls. I was like,
oof.
What are you doing?
Oof. My dude.
But I'm sure praised Kirsten Dunst a ton. I think she's absolutely fantastic. One of our finest actors. She's been crushing it since she was a child. I mean, her performance in Interview the Vampire might be just my favorite child performance ever because she's so believable as an adult in a child's body in that role. And I also said I really like when a child actor becomes an adult and seems pretty clear and level-headed, and that certainly seems to be the case here. And she continuously acted through her adolescence into adulthood. Sometimes you see them take a long break, then come back, or just retire altogether. But she, by all means, by all appearances, stayed in the business, stayed within Hollywood, and didn't get corrupted, as far as I can tell, which is... She should get some kind of achievement for that, but she's just fantastic. I mean, she's nothing groundbreaking here as the cool girl, but I do think this script is pretty. I think the script does pretty well by the female cast up and down. I mean, she's not really damsel in distress. The soldiers' plan is to threaten her to get what they want from Alan, but she ends up crushing as many toys as anybody else in this movie. So holds her own in the action, which, especially 98, you love to see it.
You do. Like you said, she's still out there. It got a little thin on some acting in the last couple of years, but still out there. As recently, just in Alex Garland's Civil War that just came out as of recording. I think that literally just came out a couple days ago, which has gotten pretty great
it looks pretty
tracking
cool.
From what I've heard.
Good,
I do want to see it.
I did read a quote from her because she has been acting less, and she said she didn't act for about 2 years because the only roles she was being offered were sad mom, and she didn't want to do that. That's all.
Well, yeah, you look. She does The Beguiled and Woodshock in 2017, and then she doesn't do another movie until 2021. Obviously, COVID's possibly a factor there as well.
And she did a TV show called On Becoming a God in
Central Florida.
That's what it is. Yeah, it went into COVID, then didn't come back because of COVID. It's just one season, but it is really good. I still recommend watching it, and she's fantastic in it.
She also did. Then obviously she came back with Power of the Obviously, because everybody knows this.
Yeah,
she did Power of the Dog, which was a Benedict Cumberbatch Western that was a Netflix thing that did pretty well. I think it won some awards, and then obviously now has Civil War. Also, she's married to Jesse Plemons, which I did not know.
Jesse Plemons is...
Did you watch Breaking Bad?
Yes.
He plays... What is that character's name? He plays Todd Alquist. He works for the guys that put You'd know his face if you saw him. You see Game Night?
Yeah. Oh, the cop.
The creepy cop.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Hey, good for them.
Yeah, he's also got a cameo in Civil War. I know he's in some of the trailers. Is this weird? He's wearing fatigues with like heart sunglasses, so like he's having some fun with whatever he's doing there. But yeah, Kirsten Dunst is great. Like you said, a long career that seems to have been relatively trauma free. I can't speak, obviously. I don't know what she's kept to herself or whatever, but I think because you look at somebody like Kurt Russell, who also has acted his entire life, but obviously the experiences for men in Hollywood versus women in Hollywood are very different. So I don't want to try to equate those, but glad she's still out there. And yeah, I'm glad that she's kind of choosing her shots with her roles and not just kind of settling for what's being offered to her sometimes. And it's, again, speaking to a much larger issue that, yeah, apparently when you hit a certain age, all you get is sad moms. And that sucks. That's terrible.
Her dad in this film, the character's name is Phil, played by Phil Hartman.
The man.
Man, we love Phil Hartman. This would be his last on-screen performance and does actually die before the film is released. It's dedicated to him. I don't know if you watched after the credits. There's a little outtake with Phil Hartman. He's like laughing on camera, and then it says "For Phil." Very sweet, touching little thing. But Phil Hartman's the best. Pretty sure he picked up a Mark Strong Award back on Jingle All the Way. No way to go back and verify that, but my memory serves. I believe you tossed him that Mark Strong Award there.
I absolutely believe I did.
He's the best. I can't. This movie came out in 1998.
Funny. He's so good.
He died before this movie came out. That's over 25 years ago now. That is insane. Like how long we've not had him, because he was such a staple of 90s and growing up and movies that I watched that it's just, it's wild. But I probably didn't appreciate him enough as a kid because
absolutely not.
His quality is like being annoying and being smarmy, and as a kid you kind of take it at face value. You're like, oh, get this guy off my screen. But as an adult, it's just he's able to ham it up. Like he's kind of like the boss from Office Space, but not quite as dry. But his ability to be like this, I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm digging at here. He's just so unique, and he's in being not an everyman, but like just adjacent to it. Like he plays the neighbor all the time. And
I think what you're kind of looking at is like you look at his character on News Radio. I don't know if you ever watched News Radio, but he plays like the loud, arrogant news co-anchor for the radio station or for the radio station they're at, and he's annoying as heck. But he's like Michael Scott before Michael Scott, but there's obviously a little bit more intentional malice. Like Michael Scott is kind of oblivious more than anything, whereas his character on that show, Bill, is a little bit more just a prick. And
I think I know what it is, Andrew. You ever seen that phrase? May you have the confidence of a mediocre white man. He plays that white man. Yeah, like he thinks he's God's gift to earth, but he's just a dude. And like, he's in this movie super into technology and gadgets, and his home theater he's super impressed with, but he's just a freaking goober.
One of my favorite gags that his character does in News Radio is he'd end up on some tangent and he would be describing painful personal stories with this like weird, cheerful nostalgia. And then, telling people these terrible things, arguably. And then he would always end it with good times and like just like walk away after that. And so it's literally a gag that I think people have inadvertently like picked up on. Like I know people do that, and I don't even think they know where it comes from. But no, Phil Hartman was so good. I mean, obviously, that's not even touching on Troy McClure or Lionel Hutz from The Simpsons. Those were also, just super funny characters that I don't think they've brought either of them back since he passed.
I would guess not. I haven't looked into it. I know.
Or if they do, I think they use just archive recordings. I don't think they've brought in anybody new.
He was supposed to play Zap Brannigan in Futurama. That role is written for him. Obviously was not able to do that, but you look at that character and you're like, yeah, of course this was supposed to be Phil Hartman. Like this is again,
And the guy
he's
is
just
it Billy
a guy,
West that
but
does it?
I think so. I think Billy West.
He's
does
clearly doing like a Hartman setup.
absolutely, and it's that
like,
thing where like he's nothing special about him, but he thinks that he is the
amazing,
greatest being. Yeah, he thinks he's amazing.
And he's really good at playing those characters. And I mean, that's, he worked with Paul Rubens on Pee Wee Herman. He was a graphic designer way before he ever was like an actor or a comedian. He designed the logo for Crosby, Stills and Nash. Like he did weird stuff like that, where like there's this whole like graphic design career he has before he's in like comedy and the Groundlings and stuff like that. And he's just great. And so here, if he had had more screen time, he absolutely would have gotten the second Mark Strong. But there are lines from his character, like the line at the end where he's like, "Hold on," like where the boss shows up and he's like, "Not so fast, buddy. There's damage to my home, my audio visual system. And this is great, thanks." And he just like walks off.
He takes that check for
like
presumably
however
a lot
much.
of money. Yeah,
I would like that exact response. This is great, thanks. Like I always in my head, but he's just great. And it's a tragedy what happened to him. And I mean, it's a tragedy what happened to his wife too. Addiction is no joke. And it's unfortunate. But I'm glad we have the things from him that we do.
Wendy Shaw plays his wife, Marion Fimple, and she is so over his stuff. Like going back to like him like setting up the home theater and like adjusting the picture, and she's just like, that's great, sweetie. And there's this bit where the soldiers put sleeping aid in their drinks so they both pass out. And after that, she's kind of half out of it. But I kind of feel like, even though it doesn't happen on screen, she's kind of playing like she's like a wino. That's kind of the vibe I get. She's kind of just floating through her suburban life with her annoying husband. But purely like a comedic performance. Wendy Shaw is a staple of Joe Dante movies. Worked them several times before this. I think he's just throwing her in the small part here and saying go, and she plays really well off of Phil Hartman.
Absolutely. I think, she's definitely over his, like when he's like turning up the volume and doing all that stuff. But yeah, there's definitely a casual alcoholic vibe there. Clearly seems to almost always have some kind of alcoholic beverage. Always seems kind of buzzed. It's how you were in the 90s. That's how it was, right? You just did that. But I
assume so.
she plays perfectly off of Hartman though. And I didn't realize that she is the voice of the wife on American Dad. I had no idea. But
a very similar character.
I was gonna say I don't watch American Dad. It's not one that I've particularly gravitated to, but she has been voiced by Wendy Shaw the entire time, and a couple of other like you can look through her filmography. There's tons of television appearances here, lots of stuff like that. But you can definitely say so. She's been on American Dad since 2005, so she got paid. So good for her.
Oh yeah. And then rounding out the family is Jacob Smith as Timmy Fimple, Kirsten Dunst's character's little brother, who he doesn't really play the part of like annoying little brother. He doesn't like constantly mess with her or anything. He's kind of just there, and then he gets captured at one point, and that's it. He's just a cute little kid that's in the family. I guess like for his birthday, that kind of sets things off. He wants one of these toys, and at the end of the movie, he just wants clothes. He doesn't want action figures anymore. It's his little arc there. But other than that, not much to say about him. He's got the typical 90s bowl haircut that every kid in these movies had. And retired from acting. So God bless him. Was a child actor, showed up in a few TV shows and Disney stuff. He was in the Cheaper by the Dozen remakes. And it looks like since about 2006, he hasn't made anything and has a normal life now. God bless you for getting out of it.
One thing I find funny is that in this movie, they say at one point, Kirsten Dunst asks Alan if he watches that show Party of Five, or what he thinks of the show Party of Five. Jacob Smith was on Party of Five for 40 episodes in seasons 4 and 5, basically when this movie came out. And so they both basically bond over the fact they hate the show Party of Five. And I was like, is this a dig? Like, did we not realize this kid was on Party of Five?
They do
like, what's
trash
happening
it. It's
here?
probably like that Last Action Hero thing where in this universe, the little kid's part in Party of Five was actually played by Sylvester Stallone.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
All right, let's take a look at this is a deep cast. Let's take a look at
We haven't even talked about the
we haven't got to the toys yet. Oh yeah, that's where we're going now. Let's talk about the company, the toy company. Dennis Leary is Gil. He is the, I guess, like, I don't know, CEO or boss man of Globotech. Takes over this toy company. He listens to a pitch from two toy designers and says, no, make toys that actually do what they do in the commercials. He's typical Dennis Leary. He's angry about stuff. He's annoyed with false advertising. He's Dennis Leary playing Dennis Leary. He's Dennis Leary, which you could argue is Dennis Leary playing Bill Hicks, who apparently it's where he stole this whole persona from, but it's neither here nor there. It's Dennis Leary doing what we all know Dennis Leary to do. It's pretty good casting.
Yep. Gil Mars. Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say. He's not in the movie a lot, only has like 2 scenes, but he's doing exactly what you would expect Dennis Leary to do if he were the head of a multinational technology company that just randomly bought a toy company.
It's kind of amazing how perfectly cast, like, everyone is. David Cross plays Erwin Wayfair. He's one of the toy designers, and he is like a neurotic scientist. He's David Cross. Like, it's perfect for David Cross. Dennis Leary, perfect as an angry boss. Kirsten Dunst, that's the love interest of our young hero. Kevin Dunn, he's the dad of our young hero. I mean, up and down, everyone is playing like Phil Hartman. He's the annoying neighbor. Everyone is playing what they are perfect at playing, whether they did it before this movie or after this movie. It's all like what they are most known for doing. And the casting in this is truly incredible. Like Tommy Lee Jones, our Mark Strong Award winner, as a military officer, a no-nonsense military officer. It's spot on, really, up and down this cast. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, David Cross is perfect as our character here by the name of Erwin, which is just like the exact name you'd expect like a geeky scientist to have.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is pre Arrested Development, or maybe right around the same time. When does Arrested Development start?
That's got to be early 2000s, right?
Arrested Development starts in 2003, so it's a few years after this. But yeah, he's probably just coming off Mr. Show.
Men in Black?
When was Mr. Show? Was Mr. Show later?
No, Mr. Show was definitely before this, I think.
Well, this makes for relevant podcasting. I can't tell. Like, you know, he's on the Ben Stiller Show too, which he's also a writer on. And the Ben Stiller Show, folks, I would suggest watching it just for how weird of a snapshot it is and how many people you recognize that are on it. And also the weird notion that there was a period in time that we as a society said, yeah, give Ben Stiller his own show. And I say that as somebody who likes Ben Stiller. Oh, it was 95. So Mr. Show with Bob and David is why I got confused. I wasn't expecting a long title. But that was 95 to 98. So that's ending kind of right as this comes out. And that kind of kicks off this next phase of his career. But yeah, David Cross is great. So, and he's great in this role.
Jay Moore is the other toy designer. He is a little bit less nerdy. He is real quick to suck up to the new boss, try to deliver exactly what they want, and it's his idea to put this super advanced microprocessor in these toys that sets off the whole chain of events that we see here. Jay Moore playing your 7th lead. Again, everyone's playing exactly what they're most known for doing. Remember he was in Jerry Maguire, Andrew?
Woof. Yeah.
I just love that this toy company, like the whole cast is like at one point my note is literally like Dennis Leary, David Cross, and Jay Moore walk into a bar. Like they all just have a scene together. Like they just round up some prominent stand-ups of the 90s and threw them in.
Boom, there you go. There you go.
And just to round out the toy company, Alexandra Wilson plays, wait for it, Miss Kegel.
I'm just gonna
She's-
leave that one out there.
she's
I'm not.
Attractive
gonna-
number 2 that Jay Moore is pining over, and her name is Miss Kegel.
Folks, the 90s was certainly a time in existence.
There's one more live action performance I want to shout out before we get to these voice actors. Dick Miller plays Joe, the delivery driver, I guess, for this toy company. And he is really good at this. Something about these types of films where like a young boy befriends a whimsical older man that's got a little twinkle in his eye. He takes some pity on him, and he lends him these toys to sell to try to help his dad shop. And you can tell, like, he just loves the good old days, and he bemoans the corporation taking over. And I don't know, it's a pretty specific trope from the 80s and 90s, but I think Dick Miller's doing a fantastic job as, playing that role.
Yeah, I mean, and Dick Miller he's worked with Joe Dante several times before this. Obviously kind of one of his guys that he just puts in there. And he's got a lengthy career that goes all the way back to the late 50s, the mid to late 50s. He worked on almost, if there was a movie Roger Corman was making in the 50s, Dick Miller was probably in it. And then that kind of transitions over time. Let's say he works with Joe Dante a lot. He's with Joe Dante on Cannonball. He works with him again in Piranha. The Howling, I think he might literally be in like all of Joe Dante's movies. He's in Gremlins, Explorers. He is in an unrelated movie called Chopping Mall. I don't know if I've told you about Chopping Mall, Chris, but I think I have because I've sent you posters and artwork for Chopping Mall and asked you to describe to me what the movie is about and asked if you would ever guess what the movie is about killer robots. And you're like,
We
no,
did have this
none of this iconography at all makes me think this movie is about killer robots.
It definitely looks like a zombie film.
It looks like zombies, or at least like a classic slasher or something. But like, no, it's killer robots that look like they're like not walking humanoid robots. They're literally just like golf cart robots. Like that's how they are. Like it's literally so strange. But he's continued to work with Joe Dante forever, but we should give a big rest in peace to Dick Miller, no longer with us, passed away back in January of 19, at the age of 90, though, which means that he had a heck of a run. But if you started acting in the mid 50s, that's a long career. That's a 75-year career. So another guy that basically acted his entire life. So good for him. But yeah, good shout out there.
Now, it's time to talk about the voice work in this film. And we'll start with the Gorgonites. And there's like a theme with who they cast of these characters that is specifically called out in the credits. The credits literally say the Gorgonites played by Spinal Tap. They just say this is Spinal Tap. Yeah, Frank Langella as Archer, Christopher Guest as Slamfist, Michael McKean as Freakenstein, Harry Shearer as Punchit, and Jim Cummings as Ocula. Now, Andrew, all 5 of these men are in Spinal Tap? Okay.
Absolutely. No.
Jim Cummings isn't, right?
No, Jim Cummings is not, and Frank Langella isn't either.
Okay.
So, just to clarify here, Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, and Harry Shearer, they are Spinal Tap.
Okay, yeah, I definitely recognize them.
Jim Cummings plays Ocula, but Ocula doesn't speak, so this is like a Frank Welker type thing, where Jim Cummings just provides the blinking noises for Ocula.
And Jim Cummings is Pooh, right? Winnie the Pooh?
He's the new Winnie. He's the most recent Winnie the Pooh. But yeah, okay. Jim Cummings is a legendary voice actor who has done any number of things. He has been Winnie the Pooh for a long time now, since 1988. I think he's been Tigger since 1989. He's been the Tasmanian Devil since 91, and he's been anything else. Chippendale, Darkwing Duck,
a rumor
Jungle Cubs, Jungle Book.
That he secretly sings Be Prepared in The Lion King uncredited, but I don't know if that's ever been confirmed.
Who's supposed to sing it?
Whoever plays Scar. Who was that?
That was Jeremy Irons, wasn't it?
That sounds right. Yeah, apparently he couldn't hit some of the notes.
I don't know that Jeremy Irons would sing for Scar, but I know he plays Scar. That's wild. I've never heard that. That's wild. Let me look at this. Interesting. I'll have to look more into that. That's fun though. But yeah, you look at Jim Cummings' filmography. There's just endless numbers of things that you've seen, and he's great. But then Frank Langella is he's an actor in his own right. And he's just brought in as like the leader. They wanted to give the leader a little bit more of a, I don't know. You could have gotten one of the Spinal Tap guys to do Archer. It would have been fine. But yeah, so those 3 guys are Spinal Tap, who will be returning as Spinal Tap one more time.
Can't
it has been
believe
confirmed.
that's happening.
With Rob Reiner in tow. How strange.
And with the Commando Elite, we have Tom Lee Jones as Major Chip Hazard. We talked about that extensively already. The rest of them are credited as the Dirty Dozen, because they just pulled the cast from the 1967 classic, The Dirty Dozen. I think all but one here are Dirty Dozen, right? You have George
Bruce Dern.
Kennedy.
Bruce Dern is the
Bruce
one that's
Dern,
not.
okay. Who plays Link Static. But otherwise, you have George Kennedy as Brick Bazooka, Jim Brown as Butch Meathook, love these names, Ernest Borgnine as Kip Killigan, and Clint Walker as Nick Nitro. Jim Brown, alum of the show from Mars Attacks, but what just a fun idea.
Way to do it.
Yeah, to round these guys up. And it doesn't even feel like stunt casting because they all fit these characters so well. But yeah, it's one of those things like if you know, you know, or if you read the credits, you know.
Well, and it's interesting too because like and to be clear, Bruce Dern was only brought in because Richard Jackal, who was going to do it, died. So
it's a good
they
reason
weren't
not
planning
to be in
to have, we weren't quite with the AI where we are now. But and Bruce Dern just he looks like he was in the Dirty Dozen, even if he wasn't. But well, and it's interesting because like you look at a movie like The Dirty Dozen, your big stars in that one were like Ernest Borgnine was one of the bigger guys in the movie, but Lee Marvin was your main guy, as well as Charles Bronson and John Cassavetes, and all of them. Charles Bronson was still alive, but John Cassavetes had passed away. Lee Marvin had passed away, so like you're digging into like the kind of the lesser known. So it's not like it's a stunt casting where like somebody's going to hear that voice and be like, oh, it's it's Lee Marvin. Like no, and even then, kids watching Small Soldiers in 1998. They're not going to know who Lee Marvin is, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, just a cool thing to do. George Kennedy, most people may know as the police chief in the Naked Gun movies with Leslie Nielsen. That was his big late stage claim to fame. But otherwise, yeah, just a fun way to do that.
And an RIP to basically the entire voice cast. At least all the Dirty Dozen guys have passed away. So sincere RIP. Bruce Dern still out there at 90 years old, dude. I love that man. Just look at him.
He looks, like I said, he looks like he probably could have been in the Dirty Dozen. He was like 31 when that movie came out. So, and fun fact, he is Laura Dern's dad.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't know that. That is fun. We also have Sarah Michelle Gellar and Christina Ricci playing the voices of the Gwendy dolls, which is fun. It's
about as late 90s as casting as
I know. I'm trying to think if this was like them taking earnest roles or like cameos. Like, I mean, Christina Ricci had already done the Addams Family movies. I mean, she was definitely a known commodity. Sarah Michelle Gellar, this is after I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Buffy was 97. So this is after Buffy.
Okay. So yeah, they're having some fun.
I Know What You Did Last Summer was also 97, and Scream 2 was also 97. So yeah, she was on the rise, and Christina Ricci, like you said, had already done both Addams Family movies and Casper. And so, the logical extension there is Small Soldiers doing a voice of off-brand Barbie dolls.
Christina Ricci get a Mark Strong Award on Casper? I'd imagine she had to have, right? No way to check, but probably we have a multi-Mark Strong Award winner cast. There's no way to know, Andrew. There's no way to know. Don't even try to think.
God, that's annoying. Who did I give it to? Like, there's no way I gave it to Bill Pullman, right?
Well, with that tone, I would guess not.
I hope not. Someone's gonna be like, Andrew, you gave it to Bill Pullman enthusiastically, and I'm gonna. I
don't think Devin Sawa picked it up.
No, and I don't think Dan Aykroyd did either. But oh man, yeah, no way to check. That's
no way to check. Andrew, let's talk about this movie. Fine. We got through that cast. It's a great cast, absolutely stacked, tons of talent. But now it's time we talk about the scenes of the film. And of course, we're going to start with the high point, our personal favorite scene in the movie, best scene in the movie. Andrew, you're going to kick us off here. When is this film firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Small Soldiers?
I mean, it's not really a scene, but like the Commando Elite assault on the house is just where the movie goes into absolute overdrive.
Yeah.
It just any subtlety at this point is thrown completely out the window as these military toys basically essentially lay siege to this house, including literally like I said, fire bombs and collapsing the porch roof, and like they wreck this house. And it is wild. But that's the moment in the movie where I'm just like, heck yeah. You've got our whole cast basically interacting together at this point. You've got Phil Hartman and you got Phil Hartman in full Phil Hartman glory. That's a little bit of a tough one there. You've got Kirsten Dunst. Everybody's there. You know, Phil Hartman's doing all of his fun stuff. I love when he's like trying to surrender. And he gets the names wrong because he's just a dumb, clueless dad who just doesn't know. And
Gorgonzolas.
Yeah. But it's great. And then obviously the weird creativity they're showing with like the Commando Elite's vehicles, these things they've like cobbled together from like weird little remote control cars and power tools and stuff. Like it's a lot of creativity in this sequence, which I expect nothing less from Joe Dante. But it all comes together, and it's just a joy to watch. And you've got our big climax where Tommy Lee Jones fights until the end, even when he's being fried between two Transformers on a power pole. And it's just great. The whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, this is nuts. Like, it's insane that I'm watching a movie where this happens. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like everything where, like, you know, when you were a kid and you heard all about how like violent television shows were what was making kids violent.
Yeah.
And it's like somebody just made a movie of it to like prove that point. Like here's toys just literally being violent.
Yeah, it's total mayhem. What I loved looking forward during this scene is like the Commando Elite create all these weapons with stuff they find in garage in the house and stuff. And some prop designer actually made all this stuff. Now, you know, it's probably not functional shooting the weaponry and stuff, but you look at what it's made out of, you'll see like corkscrews and kitchenware and stuff from the garage and saws, and it's all made with like found items. So like someone actually like things that are on screen for seconds. If you pause it, you can see all the little parts that they cobbled together to make that thing and make their vehicles and stuff. It's just so creative, so cool, and very violent in a way that, yeah, it's toys, but also it's just like these are like Roger Ebert points this out in his review. He's like, yeah, I guess we're supposed to be okay with their toys, but like they're sentient creatures capable of feeling. Like the movie goes through great lengths to make us care about them, or at least recognize them as autonomous creatures. And then in this finale, Kirsten Dunst rides a lawnmower through the yard and body parts are flying everywhere. And then there's actual like violence to humans. Like several humans get stabbed and cut in a way that, like, yeah, this movie's PG-13. Like it had to be. There was no escaping it. I mean, you would have had to have cut way too much to try to eke out a PG. And you would have lost so much of what makes this movie special if you did that. So I'm glad they stuck to their guns to keep that PG-13. But yeah, this is absolute mayhem in this final fight. So good pick, Andrew.
Yep. I know.
I know. That's why I picked it, Chris. I am going to rewind it a little bit. I do love this scene. If there's anything missing from that scene, I think by the time you have most of this movie, you have one set of the Commando Elite. Before this final fight, they hijack that truck and Chip Hazard recruits a ton of them. At that point, they're kind of faceless or personality-less. It's more about their weapons and the fight. So I'm going to rewind it a little bit to when they create their first round of infantry from the Gwendy dolls. I love this scene. And I think I was old enough that this movie didn't scare me as a kid, but this is the scariest scene in the movie. Certainly 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, you're probably having some hard time here when they Frankenstein these Gwendy dolls. They rip the chip, the microprocessor out of one of their fallen soldiers. They use it to turn these Gwendy dolls into naked, deformed, mindless zombies. All these dolls have these melted faces and their hair's all pulled off for some reason, but they're saying like super sweet things or seemingly innocent things like go on a date with me and my makeup is cruelty free, which I now know is Christina Ricci and Sarah Michelle Gellar. But I love this scene, and I love that, again, we're still dialed in, we're still focused enough on these soldiers that we're still getting their personalities. Like, I think it's Nick Nitro that constantly has a cigar. Whenever they are creating these Gwendy dolls, they all have surgical masks on for some reason, but his cigar is poking through the surgical mask. Like, he still has the cigar in his mouth. I love this. It's like true, like, horror stuff. I think it's a super smart way to work in some, like, you know, Barbie doll or Barbie doll stand-ins into this cast of toys. It's great. It's so much fun. And both of our scenes, I think, go to great lengths to try to make it believable that, you know, 8-inch dolls could actually be scary and cause mayhem. You know, what people always say about movies like this or Child's Play is like, it's a doll, just kick it and move on. But when you have like an army of them and like they have blades and they're shooting them at you and they're fighting kids, like, it's believable enough that it doesn't break immersion. But yeah, I love this Gwendy scene.
Yeah, this is a good one. It's like almost weird, like it's almost body horror, but like it's weird to say that about plastic dolls. Like it's weird to describe a scene involving toys as being body horror, but like it is this weird kind of sequence. This was also a scene where, while watching it, I made a note in my head of this movie's a little horny, and it concerns me. It's just like the military guys with the Gwendy dolls are saying some stuff where I'm like, really? This is a choice.
Yeah,
but,
supposed to 3-day leave or yeah,
denied.
What did they say? Some fully articulate or those points of articulation or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little heavy there, but yeah, you know, this is for kids. But it's but otherwise, the scene is great. I like the idea that, you know, at the time, they didn't know there were more command. This is again talking about like Chip Hazard's evolution as a character, because like he's like, oh well, we need an army, so let's make one. And so he finds an army, and he literally is like, it's showing like the processing power of the chip, because he literally takes the chip of Nick Nitro and uses it to basically wire up a whole bunch of other soldiers for his army. And it's kind of insane to think that that's actually what's happening. Like, this toy knows how to make versions of himself, basically. And that's terrifying, honestly. Like, the idea that that's actual AI.
They all have Buzz Lightyear syndrome. They all think they're the real thing.
Right. Especially him. Well, I don't know that they really dive too deep into that. I don't think, like, the Chip Hazard that we see at the beginning very much does present himself as the Chip Hazard, but during like the final fight, I don't really think there's a lot of like, because there's multiples of all of them in the final
why
fight.
Else would he be trying to kill the Gorgonites? Like, he believes he's in a battle against these Gorgonites. That's what he's programmed to do.
True. Okay,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that part, yes. But them being a toy doesn't have anything to do with that mission necessarily. Like, the mission is the mission. That doesn't really hinge on them being a toy or not.
They don't think of themselves as toys. Like Buzz Lightyear, they think they're the thing.
That's true, I guess.
Although it would be funny,
but it's in a different way. It's very much in a different way, though.
I mean, it's not 1-to-1, but
right, yeah. I guess you're right there, yeah.
It would be funny, though, if Chip Hazard, after getting blown up and he sees that he's a toy, instead of, like, recruiting him, he just goes on this, like, existential journey and, like, does a walkabout and is like, what is my purpose now? Well, how can I give back to humanity? And that's the third act of the movie?
That was the sequel, actually. That got, you know, the charred remains of Chip Hazard were going to go on a spirit walk. But, it's somehow didn't get greenlit. I have no idea why, but yeah, it's wild to see stuff like that, though. But it kind of speaks to just the power of processing they gave these toys to make them be able to do what they do. Also, the idea of toys that play back is terrifying. Like, you know, it's that thing as a kid, you'd be like, oh man, that'd be awesome. I'm like, yeah, until you're asleep and that toy tries to kill you. Yeah, You have to like lock them up in a box at night. Like you have to like restrain them physically to make sure they don't go anywhere. But
I mean, like the magic of toy. Like I was a huge action figure kid. That was me and my brother's toy of choice. We just various action figures from various properties. They fought each other. We drafted teams, then we fought. That was it. Toys that could actually think and move, and you would just watch the toys fight. Like, where's the imagination? Where's the play if they just do everything? But you're right. It still sounds awesome to a kid, but like in practice, I don't know if that's really fun. You know?
Yeah, it's a little weird.
A little bit. I do like during this kind of between our two scenes because they're kind of back to back. Chip Hazard has one of my favorite lines. I think he's talking to Kirsten Dunst after she gets tied up. And he says, "Are you scared? We're all scared. You'd have to be crazy not to be scared." And again, it's that super serious war. And like, I don't know if that I Googled that line and I just got hits for small soldiers. I feel like he's quoting something, but all of his dialogue feels like it could be from something else. And some of it is. I know there's definitely some stuff from Apocalypse Now and Patton just kind of garbled and mixed together. But that one in particular stood out. But either it's the writers that are really good at mimicking that type of character, or they're lifting lines, or it's a mix of both. But I love his dialogue so much.
Oh yeah, I agree. And like I said, some of it just it's I don't know if it's studying it. I don't know how it works, but it just all sounds like it should be from something, but it's not in a lot of cases. So,
or whenever Nick Nitro does go down and he's holding him and he's like, Nick Nitro's battery has run out, but his memory will keep going and going and going. And it's, again, playing it super serious, but you got the little Energizer reference there. So good getting comedy out of this character.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that during that final fight that feels, I don't know if it's dated. I mean, it's obviously dated, but they blast Wannabe by Spice Girls really loud on the speakers. And inside, they're like, what are they doing? And they're like, it's psychological warfare. And the joke is that, like, this music is so bad, playing it really loud is like psychological warfare. But this is 1998. This is like peak Spice Girls boy band. I mean, I guess it's maybe like 2 years after, but it's funny they've already cycled so far that they're like annoying, or maybe they're like, you know, to a certain subject, certain audience, they're always annoying from day one. But it feels super dated to me to be like playing this loud pop music. Pop is really annoying because I don't know. I don't feel like there's an equivalent to that today. You know what I mean? It probably has to do with the way like pop culture is not a monolith anymore. But it doesn't seem like there's this super popular pop music that you could blast. I don't know. Like, my mind goes like Justin Bieber, but that's like 15 years old now. Like, I don't. What is it? Like, I don't know.
Again, I don't like. What's interesting is I was looking at the soundtrack to the movie before when you kind of mentioned it, and I saw that The Stroke by Billy Squier is on there. And but that's not in the movie. And the note here says that it was replaced by Communication Breakdown and Wannabe.
Which are two different parts of the movie.
Right. And so my question is, like, during this sequence, was the Commando Elite's intention to blast The Stroke by Billy Squier?
That would be such a weird choice to be like,
it would be a weird
warfare.
choice. But it might make a little bit more sense, because like I could see The Stroke by Billy Squier kind of being more easily associated with something that's kind of annoying, but you know,
I don't know.
It's and also if you're going to use a Billy Squier song for that, it's Everybody Wants You, not The Stroke. But it's sorry folks, sorry to all our Billy Squier fans listening, but yeah, I just felt that was because first off, those two songs are two different parts, but again, it's The Stroke by Billy Squier, which even on this soundtrack feels a little out of place.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I love this movie's
I love this movie.
I do love this movie so much. I literally, like, no notes, 10 out of 10. I wish there was a sequel. I love there's this anti-capitalist, anti-consumerism message, even though it's about toys, but it's not in a way that like you walk away with any kind of moral. It's just like, yeah, corporations are bad, right? Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, that's
bad.
It's just this blanket statement. Like, from the way that, again, you talked about, you know, this military tech company randomly buying a toy company. Like, yeah, that's like so cynical that they're like going to buy a toy company to, what's the term? Not whitewash, but give themselves a positive sanitize, kind of help their image
Spin,
with the public by like, oh look, we make toys.
Oh yeah, sanitize. That'd be right.
And like, there's this commercial of all like their like weapons and missiles and stuff they make, and now toys, and it's all the same as far as this movie's concerned. And even at the end of all this, there's no like remorse. They're not like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. Like, oh, damn, it didn't work out. Well, on to the next thing. In fact, he says he's going to repurpose these toys to sell to, I think, a country in South Africa. Yeah, sell to a foreign military to use as weapons. Like, it's so cynical. Like, it's so dark, and I love that. Like it. Because, I don't know, Andrew, would you call this a kid's movie? It's PG-13. It's definitely geared towards, like, it's not an adult movie. Like, It's geared towards adolescents. They want kids to be watching it, even if they're younger than 13. But to have a message that dark thrown in there,
it's a little weird. Yeah, well, I like it too. And yeah, it's that idea that, like, basically they accidentally created drones, essentially, is kind of what we're learning here. They basically created things that you can send on military missions to take things out, and they're the size of toys, so they're naturally going to be smaller and harder to spot. But it is wild. But yeah, that whole message at the end, where like in the aftermath of all this devastation, it's literally just a guy walking around handing out checks to get everybody to shut up, disposing of all the immediate evidence, and then selling his mistake to the military. And it's like, yeah, that's...
No one faces consequences for all this horrible stuff that's happened.
No, absolutely not. If anything, they're going to get rewarded for it.
It's wild.
Capitalism, folks.
It's maybe a bit... Maybe
it's almost too cynical.
Thing.
Like,
right. It's a bit of that pre-9/11 thing where we can just laugh it off at the end rather than dig for a moral or consequences or bad guys go
Best
down.
Not to think about it too much.
It's definitely a middle ground for like where we are now, and this thing of like selling like Burger King had small soldiers toys, but some locations pulled them when this was PG-13 and not really for kids, and they felt misled. And that was a genuine, like, controversy seems strong, but a thing this movie had to deal with, where it's like, what's our demographic? How do we merchandise it? But 10 years prior, you've got RoboCop, Terminator, Aliens, hard R-rated franchises selling toys to kids, and no one's thinking anything of it. No one thinks, like, why does that kid love a xenomorph? Surely he hasn't seen Alien or Aliens. Like, of those franchises, the only one that really started the change and catered to kids is RoboCop. But still, everyone just watches the first RoboCop anyway. But Terminator, like, I played the video game as a kid. I had the toys. I had Alien toys. But none of that is made for kids whatsoever. So this movie being PG-13, like, it's funny this is, like, a big deal, just 10 years later, as we kind of get more conscious of like, wait a minute, what should we market to kids? Should there be ethics and morals involved with this? I don't know.
Yeah. It's actually wild because I was reading that merchandise section where it talks about how the Burger King executives like thought they were misled. And it says here, Joe Dante, the MPAA gave the film a PG-13 rating due to the scene in which the commando elite put drugs in Phil and Marion's drink.
Of all the things in this movie.
He says that's the thing that kicked it from PG to PG-13. And I'm like, if that's genuinely it, which I have no reason to doubt Joe Dante, but also this isn't really like cited or anything. But like, that's so insane. And like, one of the biggest things I hate about fandoms is their tendency to like armchair everything. They think every understanding of every single business or anything they like, they can just sit back and kind of postulate an idea, and they act like they're an expert. So like you get a lot of people that do the knowing Hollywood type stuff, like wrestling fans when they're like, knowing Vince. They just decide they know this man personally, and they can just decide and assume things. This is one of those things that gives people fuel for that fire, though. This idea that like the MPAA went, they put sleeping pills in those people's drinks, and not all the violence, not the explosions, not the toys trying to kill other people, it's the innocuous launching of tablets into,
And it's not even like illegal drugs. It's not even. It's
like an over the counter. It's like
yeah.
It's a weird. Yeah, so it's one of those things where I'm just like, I most of the time when it happens, I just like, it happens in wrestling a lot, where like fans will just start going down these wild rabbit holes, and I'm always just like, oh my god, you don't know anything. Like, stop talking like you're smart. You don't know anything. Most wrestling fans, if they were handed the book on any wrestling show for a week, they'd lose their mind. They have no idea what to do. But it's these things, though, the ones where studios like, well, we got to be careful. It's like, no, don't give them that. Don't do this.
It's like when they redesigned Sonic, and it's probably the right thing to do, but it justifies in a lot of these fans' minds the harassment of studios and VFX houses and demanding what they want, and it just leads to petitions to remake Episode 9 and stuff. It's like, I agree with you saying. Like, this one instance where, yeah, that is ridiculous.
And this isn't an isolated instance. There are plenty of instances where you hear about studio, like after Dark Knight came out, the whole dark and gritty craze of just like, oh, we're gonna make it grounded and gritty, and it's like, no, like, stop. And if you want to do that, I guess that's fine. Like, stop telling me that's why you're doing it. Like, don't come out and be like, we're making it dark and gritty because Dark Knight. It's like, that's not why people like the Dark Knight. Maybe it's part of why they like it, but they like it because it's a good movie that happens to be dark and gritty. Like, don't make Fantastic Four dark and gritty. If anything, like, the only thing that should be less dark and gritty than Fantastic Four is probably Superman. Like, it's that, like, I can think of almost nothing that should be dark and gritty less than Fantastic Four.
Andrew, please. Fantastic.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, folks. But yeah, I always, that stuff is always wild to me, where like you see the things you get dinged for, and like literally sometimes it's like half a second of footage, and you cut that half a second, and they're like, all right, you're fine. And it's like, violence, and it's the age-old thing, like, endless violence is fine the minute you show, breasts or something like that. Nope, now it's R. Like, you can't, like, the violence is fine, sex is not.
Or like, Drag Me to Hell, and I think it's true of a lot of his movies, Raimi's movies, but like, they had to change a scene where like the witch, like, I think vomits blood onto her, but they changed it to green, and that passed. It couldn't be red, but like, the horrific thing is still happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're missing the point.
It's like, yeah, and it's that kind of stuff where you're just like, man, like, it's unbelievable sometimes. And like I said, all it does is
Kill Bill having the black and white sequence, because in color it was too bloody.
It's too bloody, and it's like,
yeah, you can slash their gut open, but like,
you can't show red. The blood. That's ridiculous. And it's that sort of stuff that, like, when I'm just like, this is what I think enables people to being like, oh, well, I could do this. I know better. Yeah. And it's like, I'm not saying that there's not dumb studio execs that make dumb decisions, because there certainly are. But like, fans in general have no idea what any of this stuff is. They don't understand business. They don't understand anything. And I'm not trying to make that as an excuse for doing dumb things. Dumb things are still dumb. But I just wish fans had a little bit more self-awareness sometimes.
Phantoms are the worst, Andrew. I love the technology presented in this movie. It's 1998. This is like early age of the modern computer, early age of internet. It's before everyone has a computer in every room. So that means whenever we see a monitor on screen and someone typing and numbers coming up, it has to all have sound effects. All the numbers are going, because we don't know how to shoot a camera on TV yet. Like, now we're all familiar with it, so we know, like, that doesn't make noise. It's okay to be silent. But like, they felt the need to like juice this stuff up, which is so funny to go back and watch stuff from this time period. In this movie, Andrew, I'm not an expert on 3D printing. Is this movie predicting 3D printing? I mean, we see some like sci-fi 3D printing, like with lasers being done in a matter of seconds. It's pretty close to what we have now. I don't think we were doing that in 1998. But
I don't think so.
I love the whole toy manufacturer sequence, though. Seeing these things get made from start to finish, I think is a really fun way to kickstart the movie.
Oh, yeah, that was cool. yeah, and it's just cool to watch. Like, just like, oh man, I'm seeing these toys come to life. But yeah, it's cool.
Stan Winston is credited with the designs of these toys. R.A.P. to Mr. Winston, but a legend in the industry. Worked on Terminator, Jurassic Park, Alien, The Thing, Predator, Iron Man, Edward Scissorhands. I'm literally just reading off the top of his Wikipedia. The dude has like done everything.
Can't believe you left out Inspector Gadget.
I did. I'll save it for when we inevitably cover that movie on the show, Andrew.
Yeah,
remember whenever that guru guy is training him and he says, reach for the balls, and he reaches out and grabs the guru's testicles and his eyes bulge out of his head? That happens in that movie. He was supposed to grab like the marbles he had on the table, but instead he grabs his testicles.
Chris, I know. And I'm trying desperately to not just... You can cut this part. I was trying desperately to be like... but yeah, Stan Winston's a legend in the industry. That was actually something that Joe Dante kind of talked about, as they originally wanted to do a lot more puppetry. But he said it ended up actually being cheaper to do CG for a lot of this stuff. And so apparently it's like 1/3 puppetry and the rest is CG. And you can kind of tell. You can tell, obviously.
I can tell now. As a kid, I don't think I really did. I mean, obviously I knew toys weren't doing all this, but I thought there was a lot more animatronics.
I can't imagine that final sequence with some of this. And like in the final sequence, even like when the cars are just driving through, like, yeah, the toys are just sitting on them. Like they're not going hard there.
RC
like,
cars, yeah.
Yeah, it is wild to kind of look back though and imagine there was a time, because it seems now like there's no way that puppetry would be more expensive than CG with the way CG has just exploded and all the way it is. But all I know is both industries are desperately underpaid and they need to fix that.
I agree with that. This is interesting, Andrew. In Alan's room, he has a Power Man 5000 poster.
Heck yeah.
Which, yeah, super nostalgic. Everyone knows that one song, right? When Worlds Collide was released as a single, July of 1999. This movie comes out in 1998. No one knows who this band is. Their album doesn't come out until the year 2000, I think. Why and how is there a Power Man 5000? Is this like early guerrilla marketing for this band? Because that song was everywhere on every soundtrack. That band was pushed really hard. So I'm a little flabbergasted that they ended up in a movie in 1998. Like literally in theaters, people watching this don't know who Power Man 5000 is.
Yeah, I'm like genuinely confused because I assumed that they just assumed that it had to be like they had an album out before that, but nobody knew who they were.
No one knew.
It's like that's my thing. Like there's no like what's the discography? Let's look at the discography. I guess they're sort of. I guess they're on DreamWorks label. Like, I guess DreamWorks had a record label, DreamWorks Records. I have no idea if it's...
That makes a little more sense now.
Subsidiary of DreamWorks Pictures. So their 97 album Mega Kung Fu Radio is on the... Okay, so they released their first album in 95 called the Blood Splat Rating System. It is reissued in 97 as Mega Kung Fu Radio by DreamWorks Records. And so I can only assume that's why, because DreamWorks was like, hey, we have this band signed, we can just throw their poster in his room and who cares?
Yeah. Okay, so the movie's like, hey, we need like a hit band poster, and they just kept it internal. Poster. I'm sure that's how it was worded.
5000.
Because like Kirsten Dunst's room, she has like Led Zeppelin, and she might have Rush in her room, but like her musical tastes are defined.
She's the cool girl.
She's the cool girl who likes classic rock. It's just so funny hearing kids being like, "Hey, do you like Led Zeppelin? Oh, they're like my favorite band." Like it's, I don't know how you make that sound natural in 1998, but
you don't. You absolutely don't.
This movie
it's just very big. Like, do you like Huey Lewis in the News energy? Like, I just feel like it's about to follow somebody like about to kill me. Like, it's like you ever heard Invisible Touch by Genesis? Yeah.
This movie comes out before The Matrix, just
Yes,
to dust
it does.
off an old running debate conversation we've had here. An EMP is brought up, and it
Yes,
has to
it
be
is.
explained to us. An EMP, an EMP. You mean electromagnetic pulse? Well, everything, all electronics release a magnetic pulse. You just have to have one big. Like, they explain the whole thing. It can shut down microchips. I think The Matrix finally brings that to the mainstream, where after that, you don't need to explain what an EMP is anymore. But movies before this, which thanks to our Discord, we did track down like the first use of EMP in a movie. Was it Johnny Mnemonic? I'm trying to remember what it was.
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Matrix is 99 and Ocean's 11 is 2000, and they have an EMP bomb. I can't remember if they explained it there or not, but I feel like that's the turning point for like after this you can just say EMP, and we all know what you're talking about. We've seen the movies.
Yep.
Andrew, that's pretty much all I got on this movie. I mean, I can keep digging in the notes and praising it. I've got some great Phil Hartman lines written down here when he's setting up his home theater. And like, wow, look at that picture. And he's like, no, it's the chroma. Flesh tone is way off. And then he sits down and he had texted me this before we started recording. I think World War II was my favorite war.
While like chomping on some chips.
God, that man was good.
Oh man. There's
I-
no bad delivery with Phil Hartman. It's just every time he's on screen, it's just unbelievable.
I love this movie. Loved it as a kid. Watched it a ton. Watching it for this podcast was my first time watching it in quite a while, but totally holds up. It's a blast. 10 out of 10, no notes, and check out the soundtrack.
Yeah, agreed. I was just going to talk about Phil Hartman some more, but I don't need to, guys.
Go ahead. Why not?
No, I love the first sequence you see this guy in and how just so much of a jerk he is. Where like this tree is blocking his satellite dish, and he literally is just like, well, no problemo, and goes to just cut this tree down. That's not even in his yard. And just literally is like, I think the zoning laws are going to find me in the right. Or it's like, I'll check the zoning laws. I think they're going to find me in the right here. And just endless stuff like that where like there's just no delivery that's not perfect. And it's another thing where like I don't quite feel as much like sadness I feel like watching Robin Williams movies, because there's just that kind of joy in his characters most of the time, and you kind of know that. But like with Phil Hartman, there's a little bit similar for me sometimes where like I watch it and I can't help but feel like a little sad that it ended the way it did and that he didn't get to keep being one of the funniest men on the planet for a long time. And anyway, great movie. 10 out of 10. Go watch it. Turkish prisons.
Well, Andrew, it's always nice to revisit a nostalgic film from childhood and find that it mostly totally holds up and is still awesome. It's a good, rewarding feeling.
It's nice when it happens.
This is in my head as we go through this month, Pepsi month, I'm kind of help but like compare the movie we're covering versus the more famous one, which one maybe I like better. Honestly, so far so good. Like this one's kind of difficult to say which better, Toy Story or Small Soldiers. I mean, I guess Toy Story, but they're so different. It's just a silly comparison as far as which one's quality. But like, just kind of with the theme of this month, you would think it'd be like a bunch of stinkers, but I'm actually having a blast. I think I can confidently say all these movies are either overlooked or deserve a better legacy on their own.
Mm-hmm. I agree. No, I think there's just enough different that I think almost all of them are better than the reception suggests. Because, there's this, they just kind of morph together in people's heads. And I think when you actually go back and watch them, you see not quite as similar as you may have thought. There's a broad stroke similarity, of course, just based off the general premise, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. We'll see if the trend continues next week when we talk about The Illusionist. You know, that movie about magician. That's not The Prestige. But for now, it's time for our question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do just that. Just hop into our Discord. There's a link right there in the show notes. Join us if you haven't already. There's a channel called Question of the Week, and you can drop us a cue just like Mine Turtle has done. Here's what they have to say, Andrew. I wonder if you watch the old SNL movies as a connected universe like the MCU, if it would make sense. And in which order would you do that marathon? Do you start at Night at the Roxbury or Trading Places? Those are the two movies they throw out there. Real quick, I love the absurdity and silliness of this question. We're going to try to make this work. Would have started at Night at the Roxbury. Trading Places, to my knowledge, is not an SNL movie. At the very least, it doesn't come from an SNL sketch, which is what I would consider an SNL movie. It does have some SNL alum. But if we're trying to go back as far as possible, Blues Brothers is the oldest one that I could think of.
It is.
So
Blues Brothers is the first set of SNL characters that are turned into their own standalone film. So Blues Brothers comes out, I believe that is 1980. Yes, it is 1980.
Now, I don't think I've ever seen a Blues Brothers sketch on SNL. I like the movie. I can't picture them as a sketch. What's the joke of a Blues Brothers sketch?
They performed a lot generally.
It was just them performing blues songs on. That's interesting.
It's a bit weird, and like they would do like weird little rants sometimes on other things where like they would go on to like the like I remember there was one where they were on Weekend Update and they would like did some weird like nonsensical rant, but also they just performed a lot. That was what they did. And you got a little bit of history of the characters and a little bit more with that, but overall that was the joke, is that they played music.
Not a joke at all, Andrew.
It turns out it's not, but
well, I'm thinking we start there, and I'm thinking we're probably going to go in chronological order, unless there's like a period piece SNL movie, which I can't think of on the top of my head. But what are some other SNL movies, Andrew? You got a list pulled up?
I do. So you have Blues Brothers that comes out in 1980. They do not try again until 92 with Wayne's World.
Wow.
Now, the 90s ends up being kind of they try a lot. From 1992 to 2000, there are 9 SNL movies with a variety of different characters.
Okay, let me see what I can think of. It won't be in order, but you have Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2. Mm-hmm. The Ladies' Man, is this that time period? Okay.
That's 2000. That's the last one.
That's the last
before
one. Okay.
Another big break.
A Night at the Roxbury.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of a lot of like adjacent, like Tommy Boy is not SNL, but it's just kind of like adjacent, as is that Chris Kattan movie, Corky Romano. That's not SNL though, right?
No.
That's just Chris Kattan. I don't know. What else is there, Andrew?
So you get Wayne's World in 92. You get Coneheads in 93.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So Coneheads is a weird one because it wasn't a current sketch at the time.
Right, they revived
it was just a known thing from the older run of the show.
Yeah.
So I guess Wayne's World was a big hit, so they were like, "Cool, do Coneheads next," because I guess they were just like, "What other famous sketches do we have?" This is followed by Wayne's World 2. In 93, that's actually something I did not realize, is how short the gap between Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2 is. It is less than 2 years. Wayne's World is February 92. Wayne's World 2 is December 93. So they sneak that one in. You have, you then get 2 that almost killed the whole thing.
Wait. I thought of another one. It's Pat?
Yes, it's Pat, based off of
that aged like milk.
Pat by Julia Sweeney. And and that one did not do well. It did the opposite of well. It has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh my god! Possible
Variety
future
magazine.
episode.
Wait, there's an SNL month just buried in here. Apparently, Tarantino revealed he was an uncredited writer on the script. I don't know why he'd reveal that. Anyway, following It's Pat, you get Stewart Saves His Family, which
I do not know what this is.
That is based off of the character of Stuart Smalley, played by Al Franken. Directed by Harold Ramis. Egon Spengler himself, the director and writer of such films as Ghostbusters, Caddyshack, Vacation, Groundhog Day, directed Stewart Saves His Family. Which, don't know that there's much he could have done with that one. Following Stewart Saves His Family, you get Blues Brothers 2000.
Oh, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah, nobody remembers that one at all. Then you get, and this is even crazier. So you get Stewart Saves His Family in 95. And then over the course, you get Blues Brothers 2000 in February of 98, followed by Night at the Roxbury in October of 98, followed by
Superstar.
Superstar in October of 99, followed by The Ladies' Man in October of 2000. So 98, 99, 2000 was a lot. So like I said, 9 movies between 1992 and 2000, which is most of them. There's only 2.5 movies outside of that. You have Blues Brothers in 1980, and then your personal favorite in 2010,
MacGruber.
Now, there is this more recent one called Please Don't Destroy the Treasure of Foggy Mountain. Apparently, it's a movie that just stars Please Don't Destroy, which is a comedy troupe that just works on SNL now. So it's listed as an SNL movie here just because I guess those guys do like SNL skits. They like digital skits and stuff. So they're sort of a group. So they're listed here as well. But yeah, so you have Blues Brothers, a 12-year gap, 9 movies in 8 years, then 10 years in one more movie. And so... But yeah, it's kind of wild that stuff like It's Pat and Stewart Saves His Family exists.
Dude,
now,
it's Pat, like I said, he's got to age horribly. It's just not where you'd go to derive comedy these days. But I do remember seeing that movie as a kid.
Oh, God.
And this bit I remember is, the whole premise is that Pat is a character that you don't know if they're male or female. But on top of that, they have like a neighbor that is obsessed with finding out, but never like directly asking. And I just remember this scene where like you see them in a silhouette in the bathroom standing and seemingly urinating. Like you just hear the toilet and the neighbor like rushes in. Is like, I'll finally know. And he busts in the door and Pat is just pouring out a jug of milk that went bad. It's just...
Charles Rocket plays that neighbor, I think.
So
it's
contrived.
so weird. It's so
absurd.
terrible.
Oh.
And man, looking at these casts, it's absolutely ridiculous. That, because you have Julia Sweeney and Dave Foley and Kathy Griffin and Kathy Najimy and Phil Lamar and Tim Meadows. All the SNL people show up at these movies. I mean, it's kind of insane. But I guess back to the original question, do I watch the SNL movies as a connected universe? No.
No.
Does it make sense? Not at all.
I said, like,
not.
let's line them up and try. I don't think there's any,
Now, the thing I will say, I don't think any of these movies are contradicting each other. So, like, all these movies are essentially deeply standalone, that if there is
who shows up in multiple
know,
movies? What actors show up in multiple movies?
Well, Dan Aykroyd is in Blues Brothers and Coneheads. So he's in those. I don't. So
that's just an alien that looks like that can't be the same character.
It can't be the same character. Wayne's World. I know Chris Farley's in Wayne's World. I don't know if Chris Farley's in any of the others of these.
That's so weird. Like Wayne's World and David Spade were never in an SNL movie.
Wayne's World and David Spade.
Chris Farley. Wow. Chris Farley and David Spade.
Farley. Well, David Spade is in Coneheads.
Wait. Duh. You literally just said Chris Farley is in Coneheads, so he is.
Yes.
They never starred in SNL. They never had an SNL character.
There is no... because they didn't really have characters that you could Then again, I would have never thought It's Pat or Stuart Smalley were characters.
I say
Like, let's give him a
Chris
movie.
Farley's
but
motivational speaker. I could have totally seen them try to do that,
absolutely.
but I don't know. Like if I feel like it's just good bar trivia because you just associate the guys SNL so much, but they never had an SNL character spin off into a movie. I feel like that's kind of surprising, right?
It is. I would.
Did Adam
absolutely agree.
Sandler? Adam Sandler never had it. I mean, again, he didn't really
He never
know
had his own
characters, but he
he's
never.
in again. He is in Coneheads, but he doesn't have his own.
Hmm.
But it's like, do you do an Opera Man movie? Like, what do you do? Like,
I don't know.
It's kind of weird because that was the thing that was interesting about, like, you look at these guys like Phil Hartman. Could Phil Hartman, like Phil Hartman's in Coneheads, could he have had an SNL movie? But like, as who? Like, some of these guys, the idea of like recurring sketches, I feel like kind of dwindles in the 90s, and you get them obviously with Superstar and Ladies Man, but it feels like they took all of them and made movies out of them. Like,
Yeah.
it felt like if you had a recurring character that you played, you got a movie, except apparently Matt Foley. But it's interesting to look back at, like, because like an Adam Sandler SNL movie assuredly would have been a hit, like in the 90s. Like, there's no way it wouldn't have. Like, it would have been a bona fide hit versus stuff like even Coneheads, which is only making $20 million off a $30 million budget, or like, God, It's Pat made $60,000 off an $8 million budget.
Oh my God,
Chris, I'm not kidding.
That's crazy.
$60,822.
Okay, so nothing contradicts. You have Blues Brothers 2000 is. Do they recast John Belushi?
No,
Okay,
he's dead. The
Well, I know
character's
he's
death
dead.
is a no.
The
In
characters.
the movie,
Oh,
it's-
okay.
the character is revealed as dead at the beginning of the movie when.
Okay.
So like the beginning of the first movie is John Belushi getting out of prison, and Dan Aykroyd comes and picks him up. The second movie begins with Dan Aykroyd getting out of prison, and he is seemingly waiting for John Belushi to come pick him up, and nobody comes. And the warden, played by
that's
Frank
sad.
Oz, who was in the first one, comes out, and he's like, Frank Oz looking at it, he's like, "Is that Elwood Blues?" And he's like, "Yes, sir." Released yesterday, and it's the next day, so he's still standing there. And Frank Oz looks at him and he's like, "Did you tell him about Jake?" And he's like, "No, sir, I thought you told him." And you're just like, oh no. And so Frank Oz goes out and talks to him, and you just see his head hangs down, and he gets really sad. And so the movie is basically like, what does Elwood do without his family? Like, what does Elwood, where does Elwood go? And he tries to make a new family, and he tries to find family, and he ends up, of course, getting in any number of misadventures with the police. It's pretty boilerplate. Like, it's pretty straightforward. And of course, there's a kid Blues Brothers now, because of course there is. Like, there's all sorts of weird nonsense. John Goodman sort of plays, like, if there's going to be a 1-to-1 to John Belushi, John Goodman comes in and plays a new character. Jim Belushi has actually played a Blues Brother on occasion with Dan Aykroyd. Just wasn't apparently available to make the movie. But I don't know what it's always one of those things where, like, Jim Belushi was going to do it, but he wasn't available, and it's like,
What
so
were
he
you
plays
doing,
the character
Jim?
all the time, and you can't hold off production like 2 months to make the movie with him. Like, you can't, like, it's like, it's so weird. But so Blues Brothers 2000 is like, but all Blues Brothers 2000 is canon to is Blues Brothers. Like, there's nothing else.
Okay.
Like, it matters
so
to see it. Same with Wayne's World 2. Like, all you have
Blues
to do
Brothers
with
is
Wayne's
in
World 2 is see Wayne's World.
Chicago.
Yes.
Wayne's
Well,
World's.
Wayne's World is in, I guess in that regard. So Blues Brothers is in Chicago. Blues Brothers 2000 ends up kind of driving around the entire country, but Wayne's World is in Aurora, which is a suburb of Chicago. This is actually the great question to ask. Where do all the movies take place?
Coneheads is just the suburbs. I don't know if they get. Oh, they're in California.
I don't think. I am trying to see if it says.
I think it's safe. I think it's safe to say they can all coexist.
New Jersey.
So
Coneheads takes place in suburban New Jersey for most of it. It's Pat, I'm guessing, doesn't say. It looks like If Stuart Saves His Family doesn't say. Night at the Roxbury is L.A., isn't it? That's pretty sure they're in Los Angeles.
yeah. Okay. Surprisingly, very little crossover. People playing multiple roles. They're either like a bit part in one, and they might star in another, but they're not playing like multiple starring roles. This guy,
like Julia Sweeney's in Coneheads as like a principal, but then she's in It's Pat, where she's clearly not playing a principal. And so you end up with a lot of stuff like that where like so I've never seen these as a shared universe. I've never approached them as a shared universe. If you were going to watch them as a shared universe, I'm certain you can. There's probably there might be connective DNA, especially with all those ones that were made at the same time in the 90s. Like Blues Brothers 2000 is kind of an anomaly because that was Dan Aykroyd and John Landis coming back to that franchise, whereas a lot of the other SNL ones were just kind of, what's the nice way of putting this? Journeyman people brought in to kind of just turn a sketch into a movie. So if you're watching like Night at the Roxbury Superstar and Ladies Man, I wouldn't be shocked if there's potentially like Easter eggs between them that kind of are little things for the fans to see. But largely, these movies are pretty standalone, which they should be. I don't think there's any reason to turn them into a shared universe. But overall,
I think by all means it could work. Nothing's really going to negate it.
Nothing's negating anything in that regard. So you could plot out the events of, when does Wayne Stock take place in the world of Coneheads? Like you could figure that out probably.
Now, if we're doing an SNL month, Andrew, not covering Blues Brothers, not covering Wayne's World, are those the only two, like, these are bona fide hits? They probably wouldn't fit. I mean, everything else up for grabs?
Blues Brothers and Wayne's World Blues Brothers made money and is well received. Wayne's World, I'm not sure if it's well received. The first Wayne's World is well received. And yeah, $20 million, $183 million box office.
Wow.
Wayne's World 2, however, still made money. Not a lot of money, and it has a much more middling response. But yeah, largely beyond the first Blues Brothers and Wayne's World, everything else is up for grabs.
Do we have 2 months here? How many movies does that leave us?
10. If you include the last one. If you don't, it's 9. It's Coneheads, Wayne's World 2, It's Pat, Stewart Saves His Family, Blues Brothers 2000, Night at the Roxbury Superstar, Ladies Band, and MacGruber. Right. I don't think any of those. I don't think even MacGruber. I don't think has like a positive reception.
Andrew, the idea of doing an episode of MacGruber makes me so happy, and I can't wait. That's definitely going to happen. I think we have 2 months of SNL. Do we do it back to back? Do we do it annually? We'll discuss this off mic, Andrew. We'll figure it out. But what do you think about these SNL movies? What would you like to see turned into an episode? Do you think they work as a connected universe? Let us know. Hop into that Discord, share your thoughts, and come back.
Guys, get me out of this, please. Please do not let this happen to me.
Do you want to co-host MacGruber with me? Andrew won't show up for that episode.
Oh, no, I do MacGruber. Some of the others, though, I can't promise.
Come back next week for The Illusionist, and just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Small soldiers. Ready to do this?
Yes.
You were literally yawning when he said yes.
It's been a long couple days, man. A little bit similar for me sometimes, where like I watch it and I can't help but feel like a little sad that it ended the way it did and that he didn't get to keep being one of the funniest men on the planet for a long time. And anyway, great movie. 10 out of 10. Go watch it. Turkish prisons.
And Andy Dick.
That guy. Kim. Oh, God. If I saw Andy Dick on the street, I think I'd punch him just for the chance.
Yeah, why not? And wash your hands.